In the late 16th century, North Africa was brewing with the rise of local dynasties, aiming to suppress European imperialism that was poised to attack across the Gibraltar Strait. They also aimed to challenge the Ottoman Sultan's legitimacy as leader of the Muslim world. The most notorious of these dynasties were the Saadis, who would pose a significant threat to the Iberian empires and remain a thorn in the Ottoman expansion. All of these dynamic events bore fruit to what would become known as the Battle of the Three Kings. To grasp the full picture, we need to journey back to the late 15th century. Morocco, then under the rule of the Waṭṭasids, was a land fragmented into smaller emirates. The winds of change began to blow in 1415 when the Portuguese launched a bold military campaign, aiming to conquer the port cities of the Maghreb and transform them into bustling trade hubs for their burgeoning empire. On a fateful day, August 2nd, 1415, the Portuguese captured the strategic port city of Ceuta, setting the stage for further conquests. Their appetite for expansion led them to annex Qasr al-Saghir in 1458, and then, in 1471, to seize the vital cities of Tangier and Ailla. The Spanish, ever watchful, seized the opportunity presented by the region's instability and invaded Melilla in 1497. The Portuguese, undeterred, continued their campaign. In 1505, they annexed Agadir, where they constructed the infamous fort of Santa Cruz. Their momentum carried them forward, and by 1506, they had entered Assuera. The years that followed saw the fall of Asfi, Azamur, and finally Al-Jadida. The Saadi dynasty came about as a reaction to the Portuguese invasions. Seeing the weak Waṭṭasids unable and unwilling to do anything about them, the Saadis took Marrakesh as a base of operations and began waging war on two fronts. Against the Portuguese on one side and the Waṭṭasid regime on the other. They inflicted a heavy loss on the Waṭṭasids at the Battle of Darna in 1545, after which they put the city of Tadla under siege. The road to Fez, the capital of the Waṭṭasids, then lay open for the taking. In 1548, the Saadis prepared a large army of 30,000 soldiers and besieged the city before conquering it in 1549. After some skirmishing with the Ottoman-backed Waṭṭasids, the Saadi managed to put a definitive end to their rule. With Morocco now liberated from the Portuguese threat, the next objective was to strengthen the economy. The Saadi focused on the agriculture to fund their movement. The Saadi were also the first to introduce gunpowder formally to the country, focusing on the production of cannons and rifles in Marrakesh from 1539 onwards. It is around this time that a Moroccan from the Souss region discovered the secret art of bomb making. It is fairly known that Jewish traders played an important role in boosting the Moroccan economy, in preparation for what was to come. Muhammad al-Sheikh was the first Saadi leader to consolidate power and unite the country. Despite having Ottoman mercenaries in his army, al-Sheikh had poor relationships with the Ottoman. During an exchange with an Ottoman embassy, he even called them the Sultan of the Fishermen, and added that he would meet them in Cairo. Suleiman the Magnificent, feeling threatened, had him assassinated. His son Al-Ghalib would succeed him. His brothers Abdul-Mu'min, Abdul-Malik, and Ahmad fled Morocco together, feeling that they could be targeted by Al-Ghalib, who was clearing the path for his son Al-Mutawakkil to take his place as ruler over Morocco. They went to Ottoman-controlled Tlemcen. Abdul-Malik had put his time with the Ottoman to good use, improving relations with a number of top officials. He persuaded them to give him an army, which he led to victory over Al-Mutawakkil outside of Fez. Triumphant at last, he marched into the city as the new Sultan and sent his younger brother Ahmad to chase down al-Mutawakkil who had fled south. The deposed Sultan, unable to rally support in Morocco, fled to Portugal and went to ask for help to the young king, Don Sebastian. Don Sebastian, concerned with the waning glory of the Portuguese Empire and seeking to regain territory lost to the Saadis, personally joined al-Mutawakkil with a force between 18,000 and 26,000 European soldiers. They sailed and landed in Ailla, from whence they marched to meet a much larger Saadi army at Wadi al-Makhazin, where Abd al-Malik and his young brother Ahmad had prepared. The battle started as Abd al-Malik lured Don's forces into a strategic location in between three rivers from which it was impossible to escape, and that was difficult to resupply. Lines were structured as such: cannons at the front, markmen right behind them, with the Amazigh soldiers behind them. Abd al-Malik was in the middle, while al-Mansur was hidden with his own cavalry behind the mountains. Don Sebastian gave the order for a frontal offense, while the Moroccan troops were reloading their weapons. The strategy worked, as the first and second Moroccan lines were taken by surprise. Abd al-Malik reorganized them in sturdy lines, and gave the signal to his brother Ahmad to attack from the sides. It appears Abd al-Malik was very sick, and he would have gone back discreetly to his camp to lay down, and he died in secret, while his brother Ahmad took over the battle. The Portuguese army was in too deep, and the Moroccan had surrounded them and won the battle. 3 kings had died on that day: Don Sebastian and his Moroccan ally al-Mutawakkil killed in the fighting, and Abd al-Malik died of sickness in his camp. When the dust settled, only one leader remained. The young Ahmad ascended the throne, and would be henceforth known as Ahmad al-Mansur, the victorious one. The battle gave a lot of prestige and legitimacy to the Saadi Caliphate, and understandably threatened the neighbors. The most immediate and catastrophic impact of the battle was the death of King Sebastian I of Portugal. Sebastian had no direct heirs, leading to a dynastic crisis known as the Portuguese succession crisis. With the Portuguese throne left vacant, the stability and independence of the kingdom were jeopardized. Additionally, the Portuguese military was left broken after the battle due to heavy losses, which impeded its former power and strength. The financial cost of the failed military campaign drained the Portuguese treasury, exacerbating economic instability, which left Portugal both militarily and economically vulnerable. In the wake of the dynastic crisis, King Philip II of Spain, who had a legitimate claim to the Portuguese throne through his mother, seized the opportunity to annex Portugal. In 1580, Philip II became King Philip I of Portugal, uniting the two crowns under the Iberian Union. This union lasted until 1640 and significantly shifted the power dynamics in Europe, as Spain now controlled the vast Portuguese colonial empire, including territories in Africa, Asia, and the Americas. Towards the end of the 16th century, Jodar Pasha led the armies of Sultan Ahmad al-Mansur of the Saadi dynasty and invaded the Songhai Empire. But who was Jodar Pasha, and how did he, a Spanish renegade, find himself in such a position of power, leading the Sultan's armies? Jodar Pasha, born Diego de Guevara in Cuevas del Almanzora, had been captured by Muslim slave traders as a young boy. At a young age, he joined the service of Moroccan Sultan Ahmad al-Mansur of the Saadi dynasty. His shrewdness and skills were quickly noticed by the Sultan, who later appointed him at the head of an invasion force aimed at the Songhai Empire. Now, a bit of context. The Saadi state had just emerged the victor of their war against the Portuguese, defeating them decisively in Wadi al-Makhazin and murdering their king, Don Sebastian. The Empire of Portugal ran into a succession crisis, as Don Sebastian had no heir, while the Spanish took advantage of the situation and annexed their territory. On the other hand, the Saadi state under Ahmad al-Mansur's prestige grew stronger from the battle, and the Sultan was now looking to expand his empire. With the Ottoman Empire to the east and the Spanish to the north, the only possible way forward was south. Al-Mansur started to lay claims on the salt mines of Taghaza that were under Songhai territory by sending a letter to Askia Ishaq II. He reckoned that tax was rightfully due to the Saadis, as his state was the only barrier between them and the unbelieving Christians. The Emir Askia did not comply with his demand to hand over the taxes on the mine. On the contrary, he sent a reply accompanied by a spear and 2 iron shoes, which represented a threat of war. On receiving the letter, the Sultan started drafting out an army, consisting of 3,000 musketeers with 6,000 support personnel. At their head, he placed Jodar Pasha. The Saadian expedition reached the river Niger and set up camp on its banks. Jodar organized a grand feast to celebrate their safe arrival after a long and arduous trip through the desert. They then moved towards Gao, where the Songhai force awaited them at the head of 12,500 cavalry and 30,000 infantry. The battle took place on the 13th of March, 1591, and Jodar's technologically superior troops broke the army of the Emir. The armies of the Sultan were a modernized force, using gunpowder and musket weapons, whereas the Songhai still held onto their spears and bows. At the moment of their defeat, the enemy threw their shields on the ground and sat on them cross-legged. They bent one knee and slashed their legs from their calves to their thighs to prevent themselves from routing and retreating. From where they were sitting, they poured arrows on the enemy until Jodar's troops overcame and killed them in cold blood where they were. The Emir Askia and his remaining troops retreated, and he sent word to the people of Gao and Timbuktu to leave the cities and flee. Jodar Pasha pushed on with the army to Gao, where they were welcomed by the Imam of the mosque, Mahmud Darami, and the scholars of the village, and were honored with a magnificent banquet. He and Jodar Pasha conversed at length. In the meantime, Askia Ishaq sent a peace offering with very favorable terms. He would give away 1,000 slaves, large quantities of gold which he would personally hand over to the Sultan, on the condition that they withdraw to Marrakesh. Jodar wrote to the Sultan with this proposition. They then went off to Timbuktu and encamped south of the city, awaiting the response. The letter reached the Sultan, who flew into a rage, who dismissed Jodar on the spot, and dispatched Pasha Mahmud ibn Zarkun at the head of 80 musketeers. Mahmud reached Timbuktu and immediately deposed Jodar, while the army transferred its loyalty to him. He then resolved to move and pursue Askia Ishaq. Askia learnt of this in Borno, so he went to meet him and they clashed at Bamba, 190 kilometers east of Timbuktu, on the left of the bank of the river Niger, which resulted in yet another victory for the Saadi army. Mahmud Pasha drove Ishaq II into exile, with the latter dying in the company of the neighboring tribes. Mahmud then laid a fatal trap for Ishaq's appointed successor, Muhammad Gao, and endeavored to wipe out the last pockets of Songhai resistance in Dendi. The Moroccan army, with a lot of difficulties, conquered Jenne in 1592 and established several fortifications along the Niger. Jenne, Gao, and Timbuktu were sacked, pillaged, and burnt to the ground. The remnants of the Songhai, led by the new Askia Nu, were finally defeated at the hands of Mansur ibn Abdurrahman. The following year saw the Moroccans appointing an Askia of their choosing, Al-Mansur's army limited itself to the occupation of certain river ports where they installed forts and garrisons. The new administration of the Songhai would be hence known as the Pashalik of Timbuktu, a semi-independent province of the Saadi Empire that responded to the Sultan in Marrakesh. Following the death of Sultan Ahmad al-Mansur from the plague in August 1603, the conflict in West Africa persisted under his successors and their military leaders. However, starting in 1612, the governance of the Sudan region shifted as local appointments of pashas were made by the Arma. Ali ibn Abdullah at-Tilemsani, commander of the Arma, seized authority by overthrowing a Moroccan governor and declaring himself the new Pasha of Timbuktu, acting without approval from the Moroccan Sultan. Despite this unilateral action, the Arma continued to appoint their leaders, while officially acknowledging Moroccan sovereignty. Even as Morocco gradually retreated from the region following al-Mansur's demise, the Pashas of Timbuktu remained steadfast in their allegiance to the final rulers of the Saadi dynasty. Every Friday sermon reiterated the authority of the rulers in Marrakesh, who communicated their ascension to power to the Pashas in Timbuktu and the leaders of the garrisons in Gao and Jenne. The Arma's governance of Timbuktu endured until 1737, marked by continued conflicts and internal discord, as well as the succession of Pashas. Between 1591 and 1833, Timbuktu witnessed the appointment of 167 Pashas, yet only a handful managed to maintain their authority for more than a year. The success of the expeditions in the south and the invasion of the Songhai Empire brought immeasurable prestige to Ahmad al-Mansur, who was henceforth known as al-Dhahabi, the Golden One, due to now having access to the gold mines. More importantly, the political and economic benefits derived from the victory led to a change in Morocco's foreign policy. Now Morocco had an empire big and rich enough to compete with the Ottoman as the rightful caliph of the Muslims. At the same time, the Spanish Armada was just devastated at the hands of the British Navy. Only one of its leaders escaped with a few ships. Al-Mansur saw that as an opportunity to start the Reconquista and take over Spain, and was just starting to make plans for it. However, from 1595, internal problems arose, and al-Mansur was forced to put down rebellions until he died of the plague before he could actualize the plans. With his death came a crisis of succession, which prompted the beginning of the end of the Saadi state. If you enjoyed this documentary on the Saadis, then make sure to check out our documentary on the Almoravids to truly understand the history of North Africa and Iberia and the events we just covered. We will continue making new documentaries on Islamic history in North Africa and other parts of the Muslim world, so make sure to subscribe and press the bell button to stay up to date. Don't forget to like, share, and comment, as it helps with the YouTube algorithm. These videos take a lot of time and effort to make, so please consider pledging your support on Patreon so we can continue delivering animated videos on Islamic history from authentic sources.